Alright, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cats and dogs, welcome to today's lesson on drugs, risks, and the nervous system. My name is Manny, and I'll get to talking to y'all a little bit later, but right now, I'm going to let my pal Pranav discuss a little bit about risks and drugs.
All right, imagine this. It's a hot sunny day outside and you and your friend decide to go swimming. While relaxing, he suddenly dares you to jump off the highest diving board with him while knowing that you're scared of heights. After hours of arguing, he finally convinces you to do it with him. Who do you think is taking the bigger risk? If you said person B, then you're correct, but why is this true? Risks are considered riskier if people don't have the option to choose them. Even though person A knows the risks of diving from that high, he wants to do it. Whereas person B knows the risks of diving from that high, but does not want to do it. Therefore, he's said to be at greater risk. But what exactly is a risk? A risk is a situation that involves exposure to danger. And as you noticed in the diving pool example, each person looks at danger differently. This perception of danger is influenced by our control and our choice. Speaking of choice and control, who knows what this is? TikTok is currently one of the most popular social media apps for kids. So imagine this. It's late at night, you're scrolling through TikTok or your favorite social media site, and you notice that it's getting late. Do you put your phone up and go to sleep, or do you stay up a little bit longer with the risk of being sleep deprived the next day? Many kids might choose what person D did. This is because people tend to ignore or justify risks when they have the option to choose them, especially if the immediate benefit outweighs the negative outcomes later. For example, in this situation, because person B had the choice and control, they might have thought that the benefit of watching more TikTok videos in the moment was more important than the negative outcomes of being sleep deprived the next morning. This ability to have control and choice can influence many of our everyday risks that we take, especially dangerous ones with drugs. Drugs are substances that can change a person's mental or physical state. Some are legal and some are illegal. Some are good and some are bad, but they are all essentially poisons for your body. You may think that medicines are drugs too, so are they bad as well? Well, yes and no. Medicines are meant to change something about your body and make it work better. Sometimes medicines are necessary, but like all drugs, too much of it can kill you and should be used according to your doctor's recommendation. Drugs were actually first used in 400 BC. In ancient times, people used mind-altering drugs mainly for medical and ritual purposes. People rarely used it for recreational use. Religious leaders would often use plant-based medicines that were way less dangerous and less riskier than many of today's drugs. Today, most drugs are used for medical purposes, but way more are being used for recreational purposes, some that we might not even consider as drugs. So let's test your knowledge. What do you think is the world's most popular drug? If you guessed caffeine, then you're right. Caffeine is a drug that's most found in coffee and soda. Whether it benefits you by staying awake longer or focusing longer, 80% of the US population consumes coffee every day and is chemically addicted to the drug. But why does this even matter? This drug can take over your control and lead to a new state of physical dependence that leaves you craving for more coffee. And too much coffee can lead to headaches, high blood pressure, and an inability to sleep. Scary, huh? Believe it or not, caffeine only causes a mild physical dependence on your body. There's some drugs that have even worse effects on your body. Some higher risk drugs can cause serious health problems and damage to your body if misused. Some examples are marijuana, inhalants, nicotine, heroin, LSD, and alcohol. These higher risk drugs can influence your body's reward system and create temporary feelings of pleasure or happiness after first use. Wait, that's good though, right? Well, not completely. Once you start taking the drug for a while, the feel-good parts of the brain suddenly start getting used to it, and your body will need higher amounts of the drug to get the same good feeling. Eventually, your body and brain will start needing the drug just to function normally, causing you to feel sick and anxious without the drug. These initial benefits can lead to addiction and also damage the structure and function of certain parts of your brain. Here's an example of how the structure of a 15-year-old boy's brain has changed before and after drinking lots of alcohol. As you can see, the alcohol has damaged and killed many of his brain cells, impaired his brain activity, and even changed the shape of his brain. This can lead to trouble making decisions, solving problems, remembering things, and even learning new information. Some dangerous drugs can even lead to lower heart rate, seizures, and potentially death.
All right, then. Thank you, Pranav, for talking about drugs and really getting to a little bit on the risks associated with drugs. Right now, I'm going to just summarize briefly what are the physical risks. So, that could be injury to your skin, like cuts and bruises as a result of using these drugs, damage to your organs, like your brain and liver, from either using the drugs or from the effects afterwards. For example, loss of coordination and impaired movement could cause you to bump yourself, hurt yourself, for example. Not only that, but you could develop diseases as well. And I'd like to also briefly mention that your actions as a result of using drugs, your impaired movement, impaired memory, impaired coordination, could end up injuring others. For example, driving under the influence. Well, not only could you hurt yourself, but you could hurt pedestrians or other drivers on the road. And ultimately, it could lead to your death. And so these are just some of the physical risks. Now, there are also some mental risks involved, such as mentioned before, a decrease in mental capabilities like memory and coordination. There's always the risk of addiction, where the person always wants more of the drug. And of course, developing mental disorders, such as depression, anxiety, and etc. Now, we've been talking about addiction and abuse, and it's more important to really get down into what they mean. So, for example, drug abuse is, by definition, the illicit or illegal use of a substance. So this could be, for example, using prescription drugs when you've not actually been prescribed them. Okay, they're being used recreationally and not medically. Now, why are they abused? Well, some drugs remove feelings of stress and emotional pain. Others can produce feelings of pleasure. And so, as a result, this could lead to drug addiction. Addicted to the drug because you want to feel these emotions of pleasure, or you want to remove these feelings of, stress or constant emotional pain. And so, drug addiction ends up becoming a chronic, relapsing disease where drug users have to repeatedly seek out drugs and use them despite all of the negative risks and consequences that we just talked about. Now, what happens is that not only do they get used to having these drugs and become dependent on them, but even when they stop taking it, they experience these symptoms of withdrawal. These symptoms could be painful. And really what's happening is your body, which has been used to getting its doses or its fix, in quotations, since it's been used to it, by taking it off, the pills or the drugs, well, your body's going to try to recover, and sometimes recovery can be a little bit painful. Okay, there could be ranging from headaches to nausea to just your body's trying to repair and recover itself, and so there may be some pains going on, and because of that, painful withdrawal symptoms, users actually go from taking drugs for pleasure to taking drugs just to escape withdrawal. So this becomes a problem, really. So, for example, here, looking at an MRI image of two individuals. So, one is the control group. These are just a normal individual. And the one on the right is the MRI image of a cocaine abuser. Now, MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, is a very nifty imaging tool, allowing us to look at sections of the brain, for example. Now, what does it tell us? It tells us that, hey, there's some bright and there's some not so bright or dim regions. Okay, looking at the control or normal person, we see some bright spots, some bright regions, whereas the cocaine abuser, that person has less bright spots, less bright regions. And in general, the brighter the brain looks, the more neuronal activity there is. There are more neurons that are working and functional there is in the brain. And so the normal person has good bright areas. The cocaine abuser shows that, hey, he or she has a loss of neuronal activity. Now, this doesn't have to be permanent. If the drug abuser stops taking drug, in this case stop taking cocaine, then they can recover this lost neuronal activity over time. Alright, so we've talked about drugs and the risks throughout this whole entire video, and now it's time to do an activity. So let's get risky. Really, the slide is pretty self-explanatory. I want you guys to think of the odds and the chances or probabilities that the events on this slide might occur. So ranking them on a scale of 1 to 5, from most likely to occur, you give them a 1, to number 5, which means that they are the least likely or they have the lowest probability of occurring. So just really rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and see which events, are high or low up on that ranking. And so I'm going to count down to 1, and at the end of my countdown, I want you guys to pause the video, rank these events, and then unpause the video to see the answers. So 3, 2, 1, pause. All right, so thanks for unpausing, and now let's get into the answers. So the answers are really from 1 to 5, being most likely, having poor driving skills after smoking 1 marijuana cigarette, becoming addicted to caffeine, followed by quitting smoking successfully without any help. The last two that are the least likely, and they're pretty close, but picking all 5 winning numbers in a lottery is actually 1 in 1,953,393, whereas being killed by falling out of bed is 1 in 2 million. So these two odds are pretty close, and in fact, if you win the lottery above, make sure to be careful getting out of bed because odds look like they're almost as likely to happen both scenarios. So thank you for watching this video. It's credits to Pranav and me, Manny. You guys can call me Manuel. And if you have any questions, please let us know.